right, today we're going to be historical detectives. We don't have any paintings or photographs to go off of, just a few little fragments from old records. And from these echoes in the archives, we're going to piece together the real story of a family from the 1800s. Let's get into it. So this is the big question, right? How do we take what looks like a simple list of names and dates and pull out a real story of struggle, of love, and of legacy? These aren't just dry facts, they are clues. And today, we're going to follow those clues to uncover a hidden story. And this page right here is where our entire investigation begins. It's entry number 303 in a book of descendants. So meet Amasa and Melinda Stancliff. Absolutely everything we're about to uncover starts on this one page. It's like a biographical mystery, and these are our very first clues. Okay, so our story kicks off, like so many do, with two people who decided they wanted to build a life together. And it all started with a piece of land they could finally call their own in Erie County, Pennsylvania. First things first, let's meet our main characters. The record tells us Amasa Stancliff was born back in 1817, and Melinda, well, she was born in 1822. So from these two separate starting points, a whole family story is about to begin. This timeline really gives us the blueprint of how they built their life, and you gotta notice the order of events here. In May of 1843, Amasa, who, by the way, is listed as a rim man, which probably means he was a wheelwright, he buys this pretty big plot of land. It's only after he secured this foundation that he and Melinda get married, and then, boom, they start their family pretty quickly. Almira is born in 1847, and their son Franklin follows in 1850. And let me tell you, this was no small purchase. We are not talking about a little garden plot here. We're talking about over 100 acres. For a young guy in 1843, this was everything. It was the foundation for a home, a way to make a living, and a real legacy. And the record is so specific. It's right there in the text. It details the purchase of just over 100 acres of land in McKean Township. This piece of property, it basically becomes the stage for the first act of their family story. But, no family story is ever that simple. As Amasa and Melinda are building this new life on their farm, another name pops up in the records, and it reveals that their family was actually more complicated. And the responsibilities, well, they were a lot bigger than it first seemed. So right as their own family is growing, the records introduce this new legal curveball, and it's all centered around a young man named Franklin Fritz. Now, he wasn't Amasa's son, but he was living there on the farm with the Stancliffs. So who was he? Okay, let's unpack these clues together. It turns out Franklin Fritz was Melinda's son from her first marriage, which makes him Amasa's stepson. And as a minor with an inheritance from his biological father's estate, he needed a legal guardian to manage his property. This created a blended family situation, which was pretty common back in the 19th century, but it definitely came with its own unique set of legal and financial duties. And this line, right from the records, really spells out the whole legal mess they were in. It talks about appointing a guardian, a role that usually went to a trusted family member, like a stepfather, to oversee a minor's property. The really tricky part is how it mentions Amasa Stancliff's estate in connection to all this, which just shows how tangled their finances and family duties really were. And here's the proof. This record confirms it. We can see right here that Melinda's first husband was William H. Fritz, and their son was Franklin. And get this, the connection actually deepens years later when Amasa and Melinda's own son, Franklin E. Stancliff, ends up marrying Jenny Lind Fritz. So these two families weren't just neighbors, their lives were totally woven together across generations. So even with all the complexities of a blended family, the Stancliff line moved forward. Let's turn the page and look at the children Amasa and Melinda had together, the ones who would carry their name into the future. So, together, Amasa and Melinda had two children, their daughter, Almira Alminia, and their son, Franklin E. These were the kids who grew up on that 100-acre farm in Pennsylvania, right alongside their older half-brother. Now, Franklin E. Stancliff's story keeps going, but not in Pennsylvania. Like so many people in his generation who were drawn by the promise of new opportunities, he actually moved west and settled down in Allegan County, Michigan. And it's there he marries Jenny Lind Fritz, locking in that family bond and starting a whole new branch of the family tree far from where he started. This one little entry tells us about migration, marriage, and how a legacy continues. So, what does this all add up to? When we really step back and look at all these little clues we put together, what's the portrait that starts to emerge from these echoes in the archives? It's a story about building a life on a piece of land, about figuring out how to be a blended family, and dealing with loss and all sorts of legal complications. But I think, above all, it's a story of resilience, of a family line that adapted and just kept moving forward. And all of that is distilled from just a few lines in a historical record. It's pretty incredible. And that really brings us to our final thought. I mean, the Stancliffs were an ordinary family, but their story, when you piece it all together from these old records, is actually pretty extraordinary. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What kind of tales of love, of loss, of legacy are just waiting to be discovered in the documents of your own family's past?